All right, welcome to our yoga conversations. I am here with Aimee Heeter today, and we're going to be talking about a few things. Aimee is a yoga teacher here in Madison, Wisconsin, for quite a long time, and we're welcoming her to the community. She's going to be teaching at Main Street Yoga Center soon. We do not have not determined the actual class slot, but that is soon on the table, and we wanted to introduce you guys to her right now. So, hi, Aimee. How are you doing today?
I'm well, enjoying the last week of summer break before
Yeah,
kids go back to school.
yeah, cool. Um, yeah, there's probably like a last little bit of I don't know. I'm not a parent, so I don't know what it's like to be in that space of like you've kind of been with the kids all summer, and you're now like making a heavy transition to this divide where they're not in your life quite as in the same way.
Yeah, it is. When you're a parent, your life just sort of rolls with the scheduling of the family household. So I particularly love this last period of August. It's a bit chaotic. But there's such an invitation to kind of like soak in the last of the freedom and enjoying the warmth and sunshine, which I feel like has been abundant, and that feels good.
Mm,
Like I feel like we're all kind of ready to begin, and not like grasping for summer anymore.
yeah, I like how you talk about this. You almost seem to be like savoring it. Like
Mhm.
there's this way of savoring the time, even though it's chaotic. Like there's a way in which you're seem to be taking in like every little bit of it as it comes in.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And personally, summer is my recharge time. Like I prioritize making sure that I get recharged for just, the different flow of the seasons, and particularly in the Midwest. So I feel like I've done well. I feel recharged.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah. I'm honored that you're going to be taking some of that recharge to teach at Main Street, which is not a foreign place for you. I don't remember if you were teaching there when I was also teaching there in like 2008, 9ish, the but yeah, this is not a new space for you, and yeah, we're excited about having you come back to that space.
I'm excited to return. It's definitely dear to my heart. I will say it felt like a main roost in my teaching time here in Madison, particularly when I was developing sort of maybe my focus and where I wanted to go with it. So I am very much in love with Main Street Yoga, and I'm very grateful that it has been revived as a yoga space, because it has a lot of um, practice and sincere sort of um, dedication in those walls. So, yay, thank you for reviving it as it is now.
Yeah, our hope is to really continue a bit of that organicness. I think that you're speaking to. That's definitely something central. I think for me in the space, and yeah. So for our folks that maybe weren't in that same space before, uh, could you say a little bit about just like either what brought you to yoga or how you connect with it, like kind of like who are you as a yogi and a teacher?
hmm I'd love to. I'd love to share that. And this year feels special because this is 2023, and I received my first teaching certification in 2003, which is remarkable to me that it's been 20 years. It's a bit like shocking, actually, because when I came into it, I I wasn't actively seeking it at all. I just basically came to a space with a friend, and at the time was actually working a job that required a lot of intense manual labor. I worked trails in a park, like building and maintaining hiking paths. And I loved that work because I got to be outside and live outside. But it was, I mean, I was like 23 years old. Like, and my body was already feeling a bit jacked, joint wise, lower back wise. It required just a lot that I hadn't encountered. And so I walked into a space. We happened to be traveling, this friend of mine and I, and we were visiting a friend that she knew that was living in a yoga center in Mexico, actually.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I had one of those experiences, which isn't necessarily everybody's story, but like after the first class, I just felt a very significant shift, both in my body. I think my body was ready for some of that action and movement that I hadn't been giving it. And so there was like this resounding yes, but also I noticed how much better I felt in ways I wasn't expecting, like mentally, um, the sort of a different quality of feeling vitality. So we stayed for the whole week. So like my first experience of yoga was doing it every day for a week. And by the time I left that space, I felt better maybe than I ever had physically, and also was very curious why I also felt such a profound shift mentally and emotionally. And there was kind of something else there that I couldn't name. So the curiosity began,
Mm.
and I began to look for it more. And pretty swiftly, um, I just engaged in pretty sincere study and practice. That original time was in 1999 down in Mexico in a place called Tepoztlan. And then from there, it just continued to grow, and my interest to enroll in a teaching certification, both to want to study more deeply, but potentially to share the practices, which I still wasn't sure about. But here we are 20 years later, and I still am very enthused about the practice
Mm.
and what it can offer.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with that. Finding yoga for the first time and it being like, I don't know how to. I mean, these are not your words, but like kind of just like, what the fuck is this? Like, just like kind of that moment of something has changed, and I can't really conceptualize exactly what that is. Like, there's almost like picking up a scent of something and not knowing what that scent is, and following. In my case, it was really over the course of 3 years or so, before I felt like I kind of got somewhere close to the source of the scent, but like almost like a wandering in the dark, but not in a way that, but in a way that feels like every moment of wandering is the right place to be.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. And something I deeply appreciate about yoga is it can really meet us where we're at in the various stages of our life. And because it holds a myriad of modalities and practices within the wisdom tradition, it's just, I do consider it like a very holistic practice in that way. It can really meet us where we are. And whether that's more contemplative practices, more movement-based practices, more sacred-based
Mm-hmm.
practices for spiritual exploration. It's I think it's just a really wonderful, accessible, inclusive system
Mm.
for discovery, whether
Yeah.
that's on whatever level you're looking for.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, um, because you seem to be going this direction. Like, for you, how do you see or conceptualize like what the practice means today? Like, in other words, like what? Uh, so I think most of us yoga teachers have this very strong sense of like, holy crap, there's something really relevant about this practice with where we're at as human beings today. at the same time, from like maybe an outsider's perspective, there's like, okay, you're talking about these like ancient practices that come from halfway around the world originally, and we're in this extremely different environment than human beings were in the origin space of these practices. Like, what kind of relevance does it have today? So I'm always interested to hear how yoga teachers conceive that, because I think like a lot of us that are really in it, we feel that deeply, that connection and that relevance. I always find it interesting to hear how people bring voice to that.
Yeah, it's a big question, but I'll try to be, um, I'm on a thing. Oh no, excuse me.
It's
Just
all
sitting
right.
high
It
out
happens.
of the bed.
That's life, right? That's
Yeah.
21st century life.
Yeah, so the relevancy now, and particularly, I love this question because the way that maybe people have, I guess, maybe more culturally perceive yoga as it is solely this like physical practice. I mean, it can be perceived this way by just how the industry has shifted. You and I have been part of the thread for a long time. So I imagine we both started studying with teachers who were not. Well, I guess I don't want to assume, but what I'm trying to say is, um, the fitness industry definitely picked it up in a big way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because people are looking for, I think, particularly in our modern technological society, where we're receiving a lot of information all the time. We also have pretty full lives here in the West, schedule wise. And because yoga as a system really is meant to sort of bring this mind body connection back into harmonization, where I think often our minds can be one place and our sense of our body, if we have it, can be very different. And so, or maybe just not paid attention to as much as a source of where the mind is, because we know it's not just the brain, but also
Mm-hmm.
the mind can expand far beyond the body. So it's this interesting sort of um, aspect that we have. And so I think that these days, people are particularly looking for ways where they can feel more of that embodied sense of connection to what it feels like to be more aware in your body and in the flow of your day and how you're engaging in your activities and your relations, instead of kind of this disparate. I mean, I often use the term like disco ball effect, like where we just get spun around and attention goes in so many directions. And then we're kind of maybe starting to feel like we're being yanked and pulled through our day, which can look broader into weeks and stages of time. And so I believe that yoga's timelessness, and I am speaking to it more than just looking at it as a method of fitness, because I don't really teach from that space. But I think yoga's timelessness is the way that it can sort of bring back these dispersed qualities of attention, of energy, of mind, and even dispersal in the body, and just bring back this sense of connection, wholeness, presence.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to move through our day, our inner world, and our outer world with more of that intact sense of self presence, which really can change how your day is.
Mm.
And if we look at it, we can look at it just from a day perspective. But as we engage with the practices and, kind of make them our own, also with the tutelage of teachers, it's very profound, the
Yeah.
the the quality of experience that you can move through your life with.
Yeah. Well put. I think your description between the difference between like something that is merely a fitness class and something that brings that deeper sense of connection and integration is it's difficult to describe to somebody who hasn't had the experience. And I but that said, I think you embodied that beautifully just from the start of the call. Like we're just sort of small talking a little bit about what's going on in your life, but rather than it being, I think, boring small talk, there was a way in which I felt you bring a sense of just really like there's a way in which an experience of your richness of this particular time of transition with your kids landed with me as somebody who doesn't have kids, who really doesn't have like the life experience to even relate to that directly. And so, yeah, I think I would try to direct people back to that, which is like not that any of us yoga teachers are like 24/7, just like tapped in, but there is a way in which the practice over time gives us at least, I think, more of those moments of being able to experience existence with a richness to it, and it's hard to put a value on that because in a lot of ways it's it's just kind of everything that it we're meant to be as humans.
Yeah. I mean, and you spoke to it's so different now how we're living from the origins of where these practices were born. And yet, the relevancy remains the same. Like, how present are you to your experience, your life, your inner world, your outer world? And I imagine they had a whole set of challenges we just don't have to deal with, because of some of the benefit of living in modernity. you
Hmm.
know I don't really have to, yeah, well, I don't think we need to espouse on that. Very different times, and we all still face this, the ways that we can be misperceiving ourselves and things, the ways that we can get too attached to things that are going really well, and we just don't want that to change, so we grasp and get super attached. And it can create a lot of problems for ourselves, and we can, it's all, this is natural human nature stuff,
Yep.
wanting to stay away from change, from pain, from suffering. Absolutely universal. There's things I don't like. I don't really want them around me, and sometimes I have to deal with things that I don't like. I have to deal with change, I have to deal with pain, I have to deal with suffering. And so and then, of course, the whole thing about fear, which yoga speaks to quite eloquently. And how do we live from a place where we're not necessarily always coming from these cycles, grasping, averting, misperceiving, being in fear? And how can we sort of move through our time and our experiences with a sense of connection, with a sense of place and belonging, and understanding that all of those things I was just speaking to have like a temporary cyclical nature to them. And so we can move through them with this awareness, but also with more grace, that there's more to life than these pinpointed, more difficult, maybe mind frames or real experiences that we move through. And then I think that's the harder part to speak to, because it's so experiential, and it's something that begins to get more embedded in your sort of frame of consciousness and perception, but also Yeah, just it's a gift to sort of be changed and remember that there's something also inside that doesn't change. And I
Hmm.
think that's the deeper dimension that yoga ultimately is for those that want to be on the trail long enough to keep picking up that scent. Well, actually, I think some of that comes right away with practice. Why do we feel just so good? And then maybe I can, sense that some experiences might not like knock me fully off my horse and be like, like I'm a mess again, or feeling very messy in an experience. But sometimes not so much. Like I can like see it and be like, oh, this thing's happening again. And oh, this is how I usually react to my, oh, I see all that stuff happening again. And how am I going to do this now? And so yoga really begins to embed this opportunity to see
Mm. Yeah.
and to respond and potentially not to live a life completely from that sort of fear space, grasping space, averting space, because there's so much we don't have control over. So we're sort of working with what we can, I don't want to say control, but what is also there.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you nicely outlined the ways in which this practice gets to the fundamentals of what it means to exist. And if you aren't anchored in that, as I would say, I probably wasn't very much in a lot of ways before I started yoga, then a lot of this might kind of sound like gibberish, but like as I found I got anchored in it, it was there. Yeah, there's there's a way of following the scent that just I just like how easily the practice kind of takes a lot of us there. Like we're we've been espousing a lot of high mindedness in the last few minutes, but at the same time, like you said earlier, it can meet us where we're at. And I know for me, none of what we've been talking about was any reason that I started practicing yoga. I started practicing because I was having back pain as a office worker,
It
and yeah,
was a manual laborer for me, but yeah, back pain. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it kind of just invited me to a next step when I was ready to take it, but wasn't aggressive or pushing about it or anything like that. And I think there's something really rich to the fact that yoga can be what it needs to be for a person, including if what it needs to be is fitness or just helping them feel better in their body. And if that's what you need in the moment, that's what it can be. And that's pretty great. And in a way, I think this could be a whole discussion. Maybe we don't want to get into it, but in a way, I think like I've often thought like maybe in like the last 10 years, that's kind of been like the double-edged sword that yoga in the West has been going through, which is like this. There's this accessibility of it being like yeah, fitness and like a thing that can help you feel better in your body, which I think is really great and really important. Like, I don't know too many people that if I just walk down the street and it's like, hey, come and do this bunch of meditation and you're going to like understand the nature of existence. Like, I don't know how compelling that is versus like, hey, let's just move around and, see if you don't feel better. Like, there's a way in which it can, this particular practice of like a contained yoga class where it is yes breath work, yes mindfulness, but a lot of just like physical activity can meet us where we're at.
Hmm.
At the same time, there are ways in which it as an industry has taken that and then cut off a pathway to something deeper than that. And so I don't think there's any. I personally, I'm not one of those teachers that is like there's something bad or wrong with someone coming for fitness reasons or physical reasons and they don't really care about the rest. I think that's great, but part of what makes yoga rich for me is there is that invitation to something more if people want it.
Yeah. I thanks for bringing it back to the simplicity, because I know I can get I'm deep in this world, it's become a significant part of my life where I thought it would stay extremely tangential for a while. Like I'm like, again, I like the surprise that it's been 20 years. Very surprised. But that, originally when I was speaking to how we can have this like just a lot of dispersed mental space and energy, and I love yoga because it actually is an embodiment practice. Like um it just invites us, and it can be so simple. It can be so simple, just moving, breathing, um and just feeling better. It's such a gift. And I think the relevancy of yoga still remains so strong in these times because we're sort of getting more caught up in those mental spaces. And so I guess I do keep reverting back to speaking at it through the lens of the mind, but there's something so just sweetly um, wonderful about through just accessible or um, sets of movements that you just kind of come back to yourself as an embodied being. Like it really helps me get out of my head.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I need that sort of embodiment piece, which I
Yeah.
love. Like I wasn't attracted to Buddhism because I didn't just. I needed like the movement, or I wanted it. It benefited me greatly. I love Buddhism, by the way. Not trying to shirk that
Yeah.
at all. And I love, again, that sort of holistic quality. And there's days I just, want just some movement, some breath, just so I can just keep moving and feeling good, not looking at any of these bigger pieces that maybe I've been speaking to. Yeah. And what I love is all this kind of happens from a non-intellectual space.
Totally.
Uh, when you're actually just in the experience of the practice, it just sort of all happens for you
Yeah.
for you in your own way.
Yeah, so I think everybody's got a pretty good sense of who you are and how you've come at yoga. Do you want to say just a little bit about like maybe what someone might expect if they come into one of your classes?
Oh yes. Yes, thank you. These days I love teaching from a place kind of I often call it like slow flow. So and that can range in intensity, and I try to be clear about that. Sometimes I teach like gentle flow classes, or sometimes more of a slow flow base that might not be so gentle. But the reason I'm saying slow flow is just giving the opportunity to both move dynamically, kind of in and out of postures or between postures. So there is a strong breath-based element to how I share hatha yoga classes, and then opportunities to like really be in a posture within that slow flow style, and as I put it, kind of like marinate in it and feel into it, and then often I there's the shavasana, the final relaxation, so important. And then I love sharing the more subtle practices, the more breath-based, just like pranayama and or meditation at the end. So in my classes, there's at least some of that subtlety that happens at the end,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's both the breath and meditation or simply breath or meditation. And I'm
Yeah.
also a huge fan of yoga nidra. So I love bringing yoga nidra into practice spaces, which is more of a sort of guide. It's more of an in-depth sort of guided mind body relaxation practice. I could go on about that one, but that's a very passionate practice that I love to share. Particularly, I find relevancy in these times for people's nervous systems and for folks who meditation just might not really be their thing. I find that it can really invite people inward in a different way. That's very beneficial.
Yeah, I like that. The relaxing into the inwardness, I think, very naturally comes at that time near the end. A lot of people don't know that the reason uh, that a lot of the early yoga teachers that brought yoga west, like the system was to do that, to keep it simple, move around, and then get into some of the more subtle aspects afterwards. Uh, but a lot of them started doing meditation at the beginning because Westerners would stick around for the meditation at the end of it.
It's true. Like one of the first styles I studied was Shivananda, and it was the only one I've seen the breath work right in the beginning. And it was because of that. Like, yeah, because Master Shivananda was like, give them the breath because they're not gonna wait around for it at the end. So anyway.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks for talking to me today, Amy. It's good to, yeah, it's
Yeah.
wonderful. And yeah, I'm really hoping, I mean, this is definitely a new endeavor for me in running a yoga studio, but I really want to get you into some spots, and I think that'll happen soon. And we'll make this work. And in the meantime, people should watch the schedule for Amy being on there. You never know. Sometimes we have some subs and everything, and yeah, please come check out this gift to the Madison community. We're happy to have you.
And I'm really excited to walk back into that space, which I plan to do very soon. I'm thrilled. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.